Members of my Joyce Irish Literature class. Sorry I couldn't join you guys tonight. We had a little family emergency, so I'm coming to you virtually so that I can tell you all about the manuscript in the manuscript collection. I'll tell you first, if you're interested in old books at all, it's worth a trip down there. It's very cool to see some of the things that they have down there and spend some time there, so I highly recommend it, even if it's only just to see the portrait manuscript. I think when you go down to see the manuscript, the biggest thing that you learn about, aside from getting to see what it looks like in Joyce's hand and sort of feeling that closeness to it, is the genesis of the story itself, of all the phases that Portrait of the Artist went through before it became Portrait of the Artist. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I learned while I was down there. In January of 1904, Joyce had a short piece called Portrait of the Artist that he submitted to a publication called Dana that was rejected. And in February of that same year, '04, on February 2nd, which is his birthday, and Joyce did this a lot. He had a couple of books released. I think Ulysses was released on his birthday. He found his birthday very portentous. So on February 2nd of '04, he releases his grand plan for a book called Stephen Hero to his brother Stanislaus and begins work on it. In October of that year, he left Ireland, and he was about halfway into the 7th chapter of Stephen Hero, according to the introduction to the manuscript. There's evidence that he sent the manuscript to Stanislaus for feedback in 1905, because you can see some of Stanislaus's notes, and he writes about that in his book about being Joyce's brother. Around 1905, he put aside work on Stephen Hero. And by the way, it's worth noting that both the title Stephen Hero and the original short piece Portrait of the Artist, both of those titles were suggested by Stanislaus to Joyce. So he took both of those. So if you think Portrait of the Artist as a young man is a rather pretentious, self-centered title, it's better than Stephen Hero, right? Anyway, around 1905, he put aside work on Stephen Hero to work on Dubliners. He sort of powered through Dubliners, and after the publication of Dubliners, he wanted to return and work on this project, but he had kind of come to a place where he wasn't sure Stephen Hero was working. So he used Stephen Hero as quarry. He quarried from it, is the term that the introduction uses, to begin work on Portrait of the Artist as a young man. More notes. So when you look at the original manuscript of Stephen Hero, which is the first volume of the Joyce manuscript, the Portrait of the Artist manuscript, you can see on that manuscript where Joyce has gone through and labeled things and marked things that he clearly wants to sort of lift and use. You can see his markings. Allegedly, they are in red and blue crayon and pencil. This is a black and white copy, so you can't see that, but you can definitely see the markings, and he's labeled things. And so that's a really cool part of the Stephen Hero manuscript. You can see that Chapter 5 of Portrait of the Artist corresponds to a section in the Stephen Hero manuscript labeled University College. And there's a section in the Stephen Hero manuscript called Departure for Paris that clearly corresponds with the end of Portrait of the Artist as a young man. So you can see pretty clearly where he's lifted these pieces. At some point during his work in sort of scavenging Stephen Hero and creating Portrait of the Artist, he became frustrated with both and allegedly tossed the Stephen Hero manuscript and possibly, according to some scholars, some pages of the original Portrait of the Artist, or some part of Portrait that he was working on, into the fire. And Nora rescued them and was able to save them. But allegedly, he threw some pieces into the fire. He became so frustrated. Today, of the original 914 pages, according to some of Joyce's records, there were 914 pages. Only 401 of them survive. So the Stephen Hero itself is a fragment. You can purchase Stephen Hero. I have stolen my husband's copy. And I'll tell you a little bit more about this copy and the preface that's in it because our edition talks about that. The introduction to our manuscripts edition talks about that. Portrait of the Artist itself was published in 1914. So next year will be the 100-year anniversary. So anybody who's planning a trip to Dublin next year, do it in June. Should be a fun time to be in Dublin. Published in 1914. In 1935, Sylvia Beach offered the original Stephen Hero manuscript for sale. She later donated the entire original manuscript of Portrait of the Artist to the National Library in Ireland, where it exists now. The Stephen Hero manuscript was acquired by Harvard in 1938, and in 1944, a man named Thomas Spencer put it together. Sorry if you can hear the dog. Put it together in an edition that I just showed you, and he wrote a preface to it. What's interesting is that according to our manuscript in the Louisville Library, the preface in the 1944 Thomas Spencer edition is slightly, and the whole book is slightly in error because some of the chapters are misnumbered. His original interpretation of Joyce's manuscript is not quite right. So some of the things in here are misnumbered if you get this particular edition. The manuscript itself, so that's pretty much Stephen Hero and the genesis of the manuscript. When you go to look at the manuscript itself, the first volume is Stephen Hero. The following 3 volumes are the Joyce the portrait manuscript, and then sort of appendices. So there's 4 big volumes. The portrait manuscript is really neat to see. The difference between that and Stephen Hero is in Stephen Hero you can see a lot of notes and scratching out and revising, and in the portrait manuscript there's a lot less of that. It looks a lot faster, and probably like Joyce was a lot more confident in it because he'd clearly been revising and lifting and thinking and processing for years. It is a little difficult to make out some of the pages because of the way they've been archived originally and the way that they had to come off the microfiche, from what I understand. They're cut off. And the beginning of the volume has a guide that tells you, as you get to each page, if you'd like to see what the full text is, you go back to the guide and you flip and see what is missing. But it's neat. I think the coolest thing to do is go down there and flip through the manuscript and see if you can identify your favorite parts from Portrait of the Artist and sort of see them in Joyce's hand. As far as promoting conversation about this, I know you guys each had a chapter, so there were things that you could say analysis wise. I don't know a lot that I could say to provoke conversation other than to ask what piece of the book resonates with you most. Like what piece would you like to go and kind of flip through and find in the manuscript because it's important and interesting to you. So with that, I will leave you. Apologies again that I couldn't be there. I hope you enjoyed this fun and interesting video for into my experience with the Joyce manuscript, and I hope maybe it will inspire you to go see it. Happy weekend. Thanks.